Well, welcome. This is Dyke Hendrickson, the host of the podcast Life Along the Merrimack. And I am with a wonderful guest today, Mayor Donna Holaday of Newburyport. Donna, thank you very much for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, Dyke.
I was saying to Donna earlier, I was a reporter with the Daily News for 3 or 4 years while Donna was mayor, and I watched many of her activities related to the river. So this is our 100th podcast that we're having. So I thought Donna, who is one of the most knowledgeable people on the North Shore about the Merrimack River, I thought it would be good to have her. So Donna, thank you again for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
And so one question I want to ask, Donna, this has been a couple years in the making, but you were a leader in noticing that Newburyport is downstream when there is sewage discharges upstream. And among other things, you have recommended a warning system, meaning let's say Lowell sewage treatment plant has an emission of effluent in the millions of gallons. There should be a way to warn people downstream that such a discharge has taken place. Is that moving along in some form?
Oh, yes, there's no question about it. But let me just back up a little bit because I really didn't know about CSOs when I took office 11 and a half years ago and joined the Merrimack River Beach Alliance, which represents all of Plum Island, Newburyport, and Salisbury. And, we work on a variety of river, ocean, erosion related issues. And, here it is, it's probably 7 years ago now, 8 years ago, Labor Day weekend, absolutely gorgeous weekend. And the river is as brown and stinks. And I'm sitting at a beach MRBA meeting, and I'm asking everybody, what is going on? And everyone's just looking at me, and I'm like, what? So that's when I called DEP, Department of Environmental Protection, and they were really kind of skittish, and I didn't understand that until they came into my office and met with me, and under their jacket hidden are these documents that, it was like, what? I mean, that's an exaggeration, but I felt like this was like some secret folders they were, sharing with me. And these are federal administrative consent orders that existed from Manchester, Nashua, and New Hampshire, and Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill in terms of these consent orders for them to separate combined sewer stormwater overflows. And I began learning, reading all about CSOs at that point, and found out that, Newburyport, Amesbury, Salisbury, all were able to take care of CSOs many, many years ago. But these are very, very large infrastructure issues that require, millions and millions of dollars to correct. And, I think as people weren't paying attention, they just sort of quietly made their reports of what was going on to EPA and DEP when these things happened. And then
people pay more attention now, Donna?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. I don't think there's a week that goes by that I'm not seeing something about CSOs at this point. And I was so excited when I saw the governor had put forth $400 million for the Merrimack River. And then the legislator stepped in and said, oh, wait a minute, time out. We want to have control of this money. And this concerns me greatly because, we know the legislator doesn't move quickly. I mean, there are bills that can sit forever. How are they going to dispense with this, millions and millions and millions of dollars in an appropriate time frame to make an impact to help our state? I'm concerned about that. But anyway, we can still hope that that $400 million comes to help. And that would be in particular Lowell, Lawrence, and Haverhill in terms of the CSOs. The one good thing is that there has been increased awareness, and we've actually been able to get our partners across the border to the table. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't even talk to us initially.
Well, I understand Manchester has launched a very significant program, a 20-year program, $132 million. It's Manchester, New Hampshire,
right,
to start cleaning up their apparatus.
Which is wonderful news. Really glad to hear that. And I did tour the plant in Nashua a couple of years ago, and they had been slowly putting money towards their system. But what they were opting to do were more like tight tanks so that they would contain the overflow until the weather event passed, and then they would start treating and releasing the overflow back into the river. But it's going to take a lot more than that.
Well, I thought one great achievement on your part and your team's part was several years ago when you created new harbor masters headquarters. That was wonderful. But the memorial to the lost fishermen was enhanced. Were you pleased the way that played out?
Oh, absolutely. It was so important that, we honor the fishermen in terms of what happened on that horrible day. And the deep connections here to Newburyport. I know that the families really, really appreciated the new memorial, the rededication, and it really was a nice event.
It seemed like another successful event during that period was the sewage treatment plant in Newburyport was enhanced, but beyond that, there was anti-odor hardware put onto it. Now, you seem to react to that at the point that numerous people in that neighborhood, when it came online, said, gee, this is not smelling so good. But as I recall, you and your team looked into it and then added some hardware and some applications to clean up the smell.
Well, it was a little more than hardware. It was $5 million upgrade with additional covers and, equipment that had to be shipped in from Texas and rebuilt. It was almost like, working with a erector set in terms of what they had to do in terms of increasing the odor control. But, you don't spend, $33 million on the upgrade to the wastewater treatment system and then not take care of the odor controls. And that was cut out of the budget long before I took office. It's a very, very long, complicated process to upgrade your wastewater treatment plant, but I'm really pleased with where we are.
Well, one of the most challenging moments I remember in my coverage anyway was several years ago. We had a terrible winter out at Plum Island. Some of the sewage treatment apparatus was freezing up and not being effective. So that must have been a significant fortnight or two for you. I remember you were out there going to Plum Island, working with Tony Fornari, who is the public services chief, and many others. Was that a difficult time?
Oh, there's no question about it. Because we, at that point, were still discovering the problems that we had with the installation of the water and sewer plant and the fact that wrong metals were used and that we were having water main breaks, and went to the inspector general's office, pulled the DA in, did this whole case around the engineering firm that really messed up this project. And then on the heels of all of that, we end up with the valve pits, which it's a proprietary air vac system, very, very specialized system that they determined to put out on Plum Island. I'm not sure it was the best decision to do that, especially in cold weather climates. And the valve pits, which about 4 houses are tied into each of these valve pits, froze completely, and they had to be thawed. And when it's 6 weeks of I think we had a foot of snow or more a week, plus freezing temperatures that never let up. It was a very, very, very challenging 3.5 weeks. No question about it in terms of getting that system back online.
Well, as I understand it, you're not running again this fall, but I wanted to ask, as you look back on your tenure, what are some of the achievements that you're proud of? And I would again mention, I'm Dyke Hendrickson with the podcast Life Along the Merrimack. I'm talking with Mayor Donna Holaday. And Donna, what would you recall as some of your achievements that you like to look back on at this point?
Well, I think it's always good to go back and look at, some of the major capital needs that the city had that we hadn't been able to address for years. I joked about the fact that, we used to have this revolving door of mayors and superintendents. And so I inherited stacks and stacks of studies, but no action. And it was pretty clear to me that we had a lot of work to do. When you looked across the city, on the surface, beautiful, historic seaport community, these gorgeous mansions on High Street. But everywhere I looked, everything was crumbling, whether it be our schools. We had great teachers, great programs, but we were asking them to teach in really difficult environments. So I think for me, one of the first and most significant achievements was to bring the community together to support building a new school, a new elementary school, and renovating Knock-Mullen. But statistics show you that seniors do not like to vote in debt exclusions in terms of raising their taxes for projects. So we had to be sure that there was something in this vote for our seniors. And so that's when the decision was made to knock down the old Bresnahan School and replace it with, I consider it a gold star of senior community centers. And
Well, the
it's
senior center seems to be a remarkable success. I mean, from pickleball to ping pong to reading poetry, it seems like that's going quite well.
yes, no question about this. So that, and by also doing that, it brought families of students in our school system together with our seniors who were partnering, hundreds of people all over our city, holding coffees, telling stories, being able to convince the public that we really needed to build a new school, renovate Knock-Mullen, and also to, after 13 different sites, to finally give our seniors a home.
Mm-hmm. In terms of Plum Island, that's been in the news lately for different reasons. I think Storm Surge, one of the organizations in this community, is trying to talk about the future. And of course, you're not going to be the mayor deep into the future, but how do you feel Plum Island is going to be doing in coming years? I know a lot of people at Plum Island, call you up and they're concerned down by the Reservoir Terrace. They're concerned about this. There always has been concern. But what is your sense about Plum Island?
There always will be. I mean, it's a barrier reef island. It's, the sands are moving. It's constantly creating new and additional challenges. You just have to, wait a few months or a year and you'll see different patterns of erosion emerge. You're always dealing with the dredging of the river. We're trying to figure out if the jetties, which seem, based on the latest sediment study by the DCR, Department of Conservation Resources, that there really was an impact by not building a section of the jetty that really caused a lot of the erosion on or around Reservation Terrace. But it's going to continue to happen. We're working diligently to get this dredge done in the fall or late fall and put the dredge materials on Reservation Terrace, which hopefully will buy, time in terms of where we are. But I think there's always going to be challenges there. You're dealing with Atlantic Ocean.
It seems like some things are still in the process of will this work or not. You had some large sandbags several months ago where some folks were thinking, well, maybe this can hold back the high tides, but the sandbags weren't as successful as they may have been. Were you a little concerned about that technology, or had you been confident in that?
No, we weren't confident at all, but we were, you don't have a lot of options. I had this company from France with people in Florida calling, and they wanted to do this, I'm sure it's probably, $10 million, or more. But it was a system that they had put in for much larger beach communities. I would, think of places in Florida, whatever. But we had been trying to figure out what we can do to, after we lost the primary dune, what we could do to protect the infrastructure, the road, and importantly, the homes, people's assets there. And new Secretary of Environmental Affairs, Secretary Thea Herides, who is wonderful. I think she's terrific, and trying to work with her around what we could do, because, no hard structures could be permitted out there. And so we were looking at the floodgates that they were putting up in the Seaport District. when there was, heavy rains and
Hmm.
storm surge. And, we did look at those. Army Corps had tested them, and there's no way they could have withstood the wave action on Plum Island. So we kept looking, and ultimately we came up with these bags,
Hmm.
which we thought would work, and they didn't, unfortunately. But we tried something. We were trying to do something to protect, and I suspect it would have been a lot worse over the couple storms that the bags were up, because the uh, um, Mass DOT came in and helped us on one of the storms to put additional bags in, and they didn't hold either. So they were quite surprised after working so hard, for 12 hours to fill these bags and put them out there, that by the second high tide of the storm, they were like ripped apart. So it was
Is the
frustrating.
Newbury side of Plum Island just about built up now, Donna, or are there still some parcels there where houses might be going in?
There's still parcels where houses could be going in, and and again, that's a concern. I personally don't believe that there should be any more development on Plum Island. I think it's developed as really almost to its max at this point, and people want to do additions and elevate. And I think if people do anything, they should raise their homes so they're on stilts. And I don't know. It's one of those challenging situations that will always be challenging.
Hmm.
I
When
had
you
to
look,
laugh though. I have to tell you this story.
yeah.
There's this municipal vulnerabilities preparedness program that the state has initiated, where you do evaluation of all your hazards, all your areas of grave concern, and you list your priorities, and then you can apply for action grants. So that's how we were able to raise the berm behind the wastewater treatment plant to
Hmm.
protect that during storm surge, $1.7 million project. And so the Newbury side of Plum Island also has this grant project that they've been working on, and some of our staff have been participating. So they reached out and wanted to know what it would cost the city to bond $100 million to raise the turnpike. I went, what? Are you kidding? I said it would be cheaper to buy a ferry, right?
I know it. I've seen some of the numbers also about raising the turnpike, and they're quite prodigious in size.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back at things you enjoyed doing, the past few years, especially with COVID, have been very difficult. But looking back over the last decade or so, what are some of the projects you enjoyed working on? Perhaps it was schools, perhaps it was the parks, because the parks are looking good these days. 18 parks on the river, I believe. What were some of the areas that you enjoyed working on through your tenure?
I can't think of a single project that I didn't like working on.
Hmm.
For the most part, that the city was leading, because it ended up meeting a need. I think one of the most exciting, memorable days that I will always hold on to was when we finally finished the turf field and built the stadium at the high school that had been started in '02 and just had stalled. And I was determined to get that done. And there were some fits and starts and some issues with that, and a couple changes in dates, and some people on a committee who weren't really happy with me at that time. But we did get it done, and we were able, I would say there had to be like 2,000 people there that night that we dedicated that stadium. It was completely full. It
I
was,
think you had some Hall of Famers come in that night as well.
yes, absolutely. They
I
all
mean, that
marched
that
out.
was a night where there was really a lot of spirit, a lot of community spirit. And talking about people who have been great in this community, I had heard somewhere that there might be some more attention to Bill Harris, the late Bill Harris. He had been years ago a lawyer who helped find out the litigation towards ways to the water. And a lot of people look at him as an early pioneer. Have you heard anything about either a plaque or some attention to the late Bill Harris?
Well, there's always that kind of chatter, and I don't think it should be chatter. I think it should be a plan. I mean, this is a gentleman who devoted, many, many, many hours of his life to protecting the ways to the water. not necessarily thrilled with the trust documents that we're left with in terms of the waterfront trust. However, I've been trying to work on those with the committee for a while. But I think the most important thing is that, you know, he really believed in keeping the waterfront open. He believed in the ways to the water. He fought hard to ensure that happened. And there absolutely needs to be a plaque there of some sort recognizing his work.
Well, I'm Dyke Hendrickson and the podcast Life Along the Merrimack, 96.3 FM and Channel 9 local cable. I'm with Mayor Donna Holaday. This is our 100th podcast, and that's why I was hoping and very pleased to have Mayor Holaday here. What are some of the things that you're trying to accomplish in your final months, Donna? Maybe the school transition or a youth center. What are the things that you'll be working on in coming months?
Well, certainly the pandemic has sort of slowed down, you know, the boxes that I'm checking off, because they'll be partial credit, I guess. I would really like to see the city pick a design for the central waterfront that Sasaki's working on. I think that was a huge step forward when we were able to dissolve the Newburyport Redevelopment Authority, reducing the numbers of stakeholders and arguments about the waterfront, and have finally, after decades, moved that forward. So I'm really pleased about that. Would like to see the design there. Would really like to see some kind of plan for youth services about where they could land. They need a home, they need to get out of the Brown School, and we need to be able to turn that into housing. Now that there's more funding coming down from the state on housing, I'm hoping that we can tap into some of that and begin to make it senior affordable. We definitely need more affordable housing in the city, there's no question about it. Really pleased with the Minko and One Boston Way. Absolutely beautiful, beautiful work, high end, 25% affordable. And he's also
that does seem to have come together smoothly in the last few months, especially.
Right. So really would like to see us be able to do more work in terms of affordable housing. Certainly disappointed that we can't work with Waterfront West in a hotel.
Where does that stand, Donna?
Oh, you know, they've partnered with Avalon Bay, and again, another really quality company, high-end rentals all across this country. They do really good work also. So they're talking about doing a 40B, which is essentially a way to step aside zoning requirements in order to build affordable housing. And I know, as anyone else knows, that New England Development is not interested in building a lot of affordable housing for Newburyport. We know that. The building that they showed us a conceptual design of was 5 stories high, and essentially you could barely see the steeple on from across the river, so ruining our skyline. So the next mayor is going to have a lot of fight on their hands.
But is Waterfront West still alive in some form? I thought it kind of...
Well, they're back to the drawing board. This is what they presented. It's going to be all residential, 230 units, affordable housing, you know, too big again in terms for the site. And I said to Mr. Kraft, so where's our hotel? That's what we wanted from you, was a hotel. And he was like, oh, well, we'll go back and fight Jacqueline Bennett at Oldies. So I'm just incredibly disappointed. You know, I can't get back. You know, when I total up all the hours of wasted meetings that I have spent with members of his team talking about it, I mean, because the hotel was supposed to be where the garage was.
And around July 4th weekend, as we are, so many people, you know, in their backyard just saying, how's that hotel coming along? Wasn't that?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
A couple of years ago. Well, I say to everybody, it's no longer on the boards, to my knowledge.
Right. So anyway, the original plan was to put it where Oldies was, and then they got into litigation with Bennett and Company. So supposedly he's going to go back and look at that. I don't know. It's just incredibly disappointing that we're not getting our hotel. I tried to push for something like, you know, Beaupont and Gloucester with the blue ocean so that we could have a place for theater, concerts, dinner, dancing, conferences, proms, places. We don't have anything like that in our city to accommodate. So hopefully that will come down the road. So that's something I'm disappointed that we didn't make progress on, but there's certainly a lot that we did.
Was COVID the single most difficult problem that you had? I can't imagine one easier, I mean, more tougher than that. But COVID was kind of an everyday situation, a moving target, a very serious moving target. Was that a challenging confrontation for you?
Oh, there's no question about it, because I think initially when we first were watching initially scenes from Italy that were just horrifying, and then we see it in New York City, and I was in New York City a week before everything shut down. We had taken our family for a wonderful trip to see Hamilton.
Oh yes.
And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh. I mean, everything just, I mean, I'm glad we got out of there when we did, but we didn't know what we were dealing with. And that was what was so frightening, because we didn't know, as they're saying, it stays on surfaces for 3 weeks. So we're shutting down playgrounds, and I'm going crazy with the skate park and, all the surfaces, and, just really not sure
there was a lot.
what we were dealing with. And then gradually, I think we all became a little more accustomed to distancing, sanitizing, wearing masks. And I think we all felt a little better, especially once we were keeping numbers down in Newburyport like last summer.
The numbers stayed down, and your ratings, not that they were formal ratings, but everyone I talked to said, well, gee, the mayor in City Hall is doing really well. Are you going to endorse anyone for mayor, Donna?
I already have.
Okay, who would that be?
That would be Charlie Tontar.
Okay. Yeah. And my other question, we only have about 2 minutes left. As you prepare to go off into the sunset, and it is a beautiful sunset along the river, we all agree. What are some of the things you're thinking about doing after you leave the mayor's office?
Well, I've been giving serious thought to running for the open Senate seat that Diana DiZoglio is vacating to run for auditor. I really have spent time building a tremendous amount of relationships, networks, and I don't want to lose that. And I want to find a way that I can continue to help and to support Newburyport and, areas, maybe a town manager.
Sure.
I'm certainly not done, that's for sure. I'm just want to pass the baton as being there.
Well, in our business, we call it burying the lead. And I guess I buried the lead because I wasn't aware that you were thinking of running for state senator. So, that's very interesting news for me, and probably for listeners and viewers as well. I have been talking to Mayor Donna Holaday. She has gone through more than a decade leading the city, including during COVID. This is our 100th podcast for Life Along the Merrimack. And Donna, thank you very much for being on the show, and good luck to you in the future. Do you have a last word that you would put out as one of you here at the podcast?
Just thank you very much, Dyke. I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast. And I think for people, be supportive, be involved, be engaged, volunteer, share your gifts. There's room for everybody here. And by all means, and continue to open up your arms and be a welcoming, supportive community for everyone who visits our city.
Okay, that's great. Well, that's it for us. Life Along the Merrimack, 96.3 FM, Channel 9 on local cable. Donna Holaday, thank you very much for being here. Our podcast will be here next week at 2:00. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.